Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Beef Season 1, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's start off with Amy's side of things. Obviously, her and George are at couples counseling, and I love that Amy's BSing her way through it. She knows exactly what she needs to say in the session, being like, talking about how her dad ended up basically burying all his emotions and everything he was dealing with and feeling until he finally exploded. And obviously that her mom wasn't any different, because basically talking about your feelings is the same thing as complaining. And she's talking about how that had such a negative effect on her. And she's like, I guess, that stuck with me as a child, and now it's, coming up now because... And even trying to say, it's like, when George says stuff like that, how does that make you feel? She's like, it makes me think he's right. Once again, just saying everything she can to, make George feel like, everything's okay. And, because doesn't want to get to the real, because she doesn't want to speak her heart about what she's really dealing with. And she even talks about it later on with George, and it's understandable. We saw it in the first episode. When she was about to vent about her day, what did George do? He shut it down, was like, okay, what you need to do is stay positive. It's like... you're not allowing me, once again, to feel what I want to feel. You want me to try and, be positive, everything. It's just like, she can't just be herself. She feels like she has to be a version of herself around George, around Jordan. She can't just really just speak her mind. She has to kind of be she has to be one way, and it's not copacetic with who she is. She feels like she can't really embrace being herself without kind of being judged or kind of put in these positions, especially by George. But I do love the juxtaposition between her talking about her father keeping everything inside, and at the same time it's showing Danny losing his mind and super upset because of the car situation, his truck situation. But we'll focus on Danny's stuff later. But she's still pretending, Amy's still doing her Kayla catfishing, and it's kind of cutting into family time, because it's like, right, once this Jordan thing's dealt with, I'm going to be here more often June, and you'll be seeing me a lot more. I'll be at home all the time. So I love that he's sending messages. He's even talking about later on, because he was talking to Paul was talking to Danny about, hey, I want to meet up with Kayla, to the point he's cleaning up the house, he's going out, got new clothes and stuff like that. Even Danny's like, what's going on? It's like, he's a changed man because he found somebody, the special in his, to him. And so I love that. Initially, Amy's just kind of wanting to ignore him and everything. You're stupid. Well, stop asking dumb questions. And he's like, all right, here's a smart question. Why you so fine? I was like, oh my God. Oh, that's so cheesy. But I'm like, I kind of like how stupid and cheesy it is. That's probably one of those pickup lines. But man, I don't know why. I'm like I said, I'm stupid and cheesy myself. So I really like that. So she really wouldn't have jumped at the Paul situation until George screwed the pooch, and it's he accidentally sent a picture of Mia. I guess maybe he had a screenshot of it or whatever, but there was something he was going to send her a picture of a flower or something, but ended up sending the flower and a picture of Mia. So it's oh, cool. And we find out later on, yeah, he's like, oh, I'm staring for the captions. He's like, shut up, you're not. We see later on that's part of his jerk off material. So Amy just hung up the phone, and later on, that's what inspired her to kind of just call Paul when he was just first he wanted to FaceTime, but she was like, no, I don't have unlimited data. He's like, all right, do you want to just talk over the phone? And for her, she was able to just open up to him. He's like, oh, so what are some things you hate? She's like, no one ever asked me that. She's like, okay, well, I hate work. She's like, sometimes I wish I could just do nothing, which is kind of this interesting parallel, because she's working, she's grinding all the time, which I think Paul grinds in his own way, but at least from Danny's perspective, his brother's a do-nothing, lays-about person. So for Amy, there's a little bit of commonality. She kind of wants the life that Paul leads. But you could tell, as the conversation's going on, she's enjoying it. But then eventually she had to stop herself, because she's like, I'm a married woman. What am I doing? Despite my husband, being weird. I mean, he hasn't done anything, but it still kind of speaks volumes that, for one, you're liking all of her posts, and then you accidentally texts me the image and he's apologizing and saying he's sorry and stuff, so wants time to explain. But later on, when they do have their own heart-to-heart, because I think she wanted to be vulnerable with him, like she was kind of being vulnerable with Paul, but it didn't go that well. Because for her, it's like, she talks about it that, I think she's like, there's a lot of underlying issues, and it's something the therapist was getting at too, that, okay, like you're self-aware and everything, because like I said, I think Amy was saying all that stuff because maybe she is self-aware, or she's self-aware enough to say what she knows that the therapist is like, yeah, I recognize these aspects of myself. I can say some very surface level stuff without really like having to dive super deep, because the therapist was wondering like, oh, we might need to find out what's kind of at the root of all of this, you know, like because George is talking about where did all this anger suddenly come from. It's been there, and she even talked about, like, I think when it was college, she was trying to figure stuff out on that front, and she was on antidepressants, but all they did was mute her, because she said it so poetically, where it's like she feels like she feels the ground, but it's in her chest, and it's like, yeah, it stopped the sound of everything and muted it, but the feeling didn't go away. So, but you know, she was talking to George about how she can't talk about that type of stuff with him. He's like, yes, you can. He's like, the fact of the matter is, I get it. Like you know, sometimes I'm down, but you know, I embrace that sadness. He's like, yeah, you know, I get the whole notion of your life not being what you thought it was. He's like, I mean, sometimes I think about, you know, what my life would be if we never met. And Amy's almost like okay. And he's like, see, so I understand it. She's like, Yep, you sure do, babe. So it's like, cool. That's the last thing anyone wants to be told. It's like, yeah, I think about it from time to time about what my life would be like if we never met. It should have been a thing of, I thought about, it's called, like, you know, there was a time where I question, you know, but I don't know. Even if you spun it in a romantic sense of like, I realized my life would be, you know, way worse off than you, without you. You could spin it like that, but it's still the thing of, oh, you're actively thinking. He didn't say actively, but he made it sound like it happens from time to time, where he thinks about what his life would be like because he's like, yeah, I get it. Like, I never expected myself to be the stay-at-home dad. Neither one of their lives are quite what they expect. I mean, more so on Amy's front, she enjoys her life, she loves her life, but it's like little tweaks she'd make. She'd make being able to spend time with June, be able to kind of like spend her money, do what she wants. But then, like, George, you know, it's just, they're not as complimentary as they thought. Maybe on the surface level they are, but when you get to the real, like, heart of who they are, what's underneath the surface, the real stuff, maybe they're not as compatible, and I think she's starting to realize that, so. She's also got to deal with the fact is, well, for one, Jordan, was kind of reluctant to pull the trigger on the deal despite them talking about it, because for Jordan it's like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, have you been to China? It's like, oh, not since I was like 6. And it's like, oh, you should go there, you should try this out. Was it you should go to Senya? She's like, oh, son, yes. And she's like, yeah, exactly. But Jordan wants, she's like, yeah, me both, I want us to hang out a little bit more, that way we can see if this deal is really right for us. And then later on, after canceling and having to reschedule the meeting, she shows up at the house and it's like, yeah, the board is saying, like, right, we want you to stay on. Now I'm like, is that the board really saying that, or is that Jordan's decision? Apparently she's going to be making a good amount of money, but the problem is it's going to be like a 5-year period she'd have to stay on the business because she's the face of the brand and stuff like that. And so I don't think the payday will, maybe it's a thing of like, she'd get the payday in like installment over that 5 years, or maybe it's going to be a lump sum at the very end, and it's going to be even more so than the deal she was originally getting, or we don't really know the full details of the deal, but she's unsure whether to take it or not. And lo and behold, who shows up at the store? None other than Paul, looking for Kayla. And I love Amy put him on that face voice, like, oh, hi, can I help you? Kind of going a little deeper, and it's like, right, he sees Mia thinking it's Kayla, and it's like, okay, let me explain. All right, I'm sorry. He's like, oh, so you catfished me? She's like, yeah, I'm sorry. And I was like, oh, are you going to open up about, like, this was your way to get back at his brother? But it's like, nope, didn't turn into that conversation. But for her, it's like, right, I'm sure you prefer being with her, like, you know, I'm not what you expected. I mean, Mia with her perky tits and her taut ass, and she's probably soaping. And then, like, before even continued, Paul kisses her, and he's like, you're way hotter than Kayla. And it's like, hey, yo! So it's like, cool. I mean, your husband's like fapping to pictures of Mia, but he's not. I mean, I guess it depends on how people you know, that can be considered cheating for some people. The fact that you kind of have to hide it is kind of like, that's kind of suspicious, you know? So, but now it's like, oh, she's kind of, I mean, but I do love that they cut between him jerking it to Mia's picture and Amy and Paul kissing. So, quite the interesting development on that front. So we have all of that, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Then there's also the situation with Danny. Because he's just kind of been a little lost and just so angry about everything, he ends up kind of going to the church. I'm assuming he mainly went because of Veronica, but because he had saw the pamphlet, and I guess I wonder, did it really get him thinking about like church and just wanting to give it a go? Or was it just simply a situation of, because he doesn't go as much as they used to when they were younger or whatever, but because I think it was probably more of a family thing, but as they've gotten older, probably neither him nor Paul really goes. But I'm curious, was it mainly for that reason or was it for Veronica? But he goes there, Edwin's up there doing his thing on stage, and you see Danny just like break down crying, because I think it's just so, like the music and just being in church and just kind of having that wave kind of watch. At first I was wondering if he was doing it just, you know, because Veronica was turning towards him. I was wondering if he was doing that for her sake, but I think it just kind of gave him this reprieve of like, yeah, I just kind of had to let it out, like everything, because he had been bottling so much up and he was able to kind of just wash that away to some extent. So, once again, there's definitely something with the Veronica and Edwin thing, because like, Veronica comes over and it's like, hey, do you want to, you know, come to church? And it's like, yeah, sure. And then like Edwin's sending like, yeah. And Veronica's like, you know, get him like a form. He's also going to need a pen. So I don't know, that's just her being super friendly, and maybe that does rub Edwin the wrong way because that is her ex. Despite how much time has passed, it's still, that's her ex, and she's a little too happy and giddy. Maybe that's just her being like a good Christian, I guess. Or maybe it's just like he reads more into it because it's like, oh, you have like a basketball team that's like, oh, you got any D1 players? He's like, nah, we're good, but we're good. Like either it's kind of saying like, oh, we're good, like skill level wise, or whether he's saying like, you don't have to worry about joining the church and joining because we don't need you. Edwin definitely has some like stank on his like way he said stuff. It's like, oh yeah, thanks for helping us out at the church, bro. Oh, good on you. Isn't that sign still a little crooked? It definitely seemed like, because even Danny took it as like are things kind of slow? He's like, what does that mean? And it's like, it definitely seemed like Edwin wants some smoke, you know, but that also could just be like, I mean, I'm reading that, it's like, I don't know, Edwin's rubbing me the wrong way, but also it could just be like, maybe just from Danny's perspective, he's like very heated and just sees it as that, so, I don't know. Because for Danny, it's just like, right, I'm an honest person. I work hard. I try to do the right thing. But what has it got me? Absolutely nowhere. And so the fact is, I know plenty of contractors that scam people, but I don't do that. I should do it. Even Isaac's kind of like, yo, man, you're too nice for your own comfort. Like, yo, got these shirts, the chosen ones. It's like, he also buys those like vibrating chairs that they're on. It's like, yo, you definitely get those vibes like Isaac might be up to some like shady stuff. It seems like that's kind of his bag, but I mean, maybe that should be Danny's bag as well, because it's like, oh, being the good guys kind of hasn't really worked out for you, but it's like, are you really the good guy? Because, you know, it's like, oh, nice guys finish last. People who say that aren't really nice guys. It's like, hey, I'm pretending to be a nice guy so that you'll notice me and we can hook up. You know, it has nasty intentions behind it. It's kind of like, I don't know if Danny really considers, like, you know, I mean, I think it also stems from him trying to be a good guy. He has a lot of underlying issues. He has a lot of guilt over what happened with his family, and he's trying to do so much for them, because later on he wants to buy like this plot of land, but his credit isn't where it needs to be. He doesn't have stable enough income. He need a down payment of $100,000 because he wants to build something. He talked about that in like the first episode with his parents. He wants to move them back from Korea because they had to leave after everything went down with the motel situation. So, but he's thinking about, well, the church can take out a loan, and so he has the church do that. And he's even saying like, oh, it's Edwin's idea, because we know that he was going to use the church to his advantage, because like Edwin's kind of like the golden child or whatever there. But I guess Danny's plan is to use that loan situation to blow up Edwin's spot and make him look like a terrible person, because you're putting it all on him being like, oh, it was actually Edwin's idea for the church to take out this $100,000 loan. Oh, I'll help out with the repairs and I'll do it for free. He's trying to make himself seem saintly, which is like, man, makes you look even more like a scumbag. Oh, let's also not forget what sent him spiraling and going to church in the first place. He went to Amy's truck and was going to set it on fire. He literally poured either lighter fluid or gas on it and was about to light it up until he saw June was in the vehicle. You're like, hey, yo, that's wild, homie. So understandable why he went to church and bust down, because everything he's going through, plus you almost did that. So it's like, man, you're on some monster shit right now. Either way, he even at the church, he's like, Veronica's like, oh, do you still play? He's like, oh, a little bit. And he's doing his thing. You can see Edwin just sitting there kind of staring forward because you can tell it's rubbing him the wrong way. But Danny, we see him legitimately happy. It's this scummy happy because we know what you're doing. You even texted Isaac because yo, they're putting out the loan. Next up is for us to move into phase 2. So what that all entails, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But it's interesting while that's all happening, Danny's on the up. Obviously, Amy's in her complicated situation. George is doing what he's doing. I think it's so interesting that June paints a picture that's kind of very angry, especially because it's coming full circle, considering she was BSing it, but there's still truth to, oh, I don't want the neural pathways that I've kind of created that are stemming from my childhood to pass on to June. But she had that family photo. She's like, oh, it's not done yet. She kept saying that. And now she's like, it's her and her family, but they're covered in red. I don't know if that was supposed to be significant of the Danny thing, or because he didn't light the car on fire, he just poured the liquid out there was about to, so it's not where would she have gotten, I don't know if that was supposed to be signifying fire. I'm sure it's more supposed to symbolic her rage, because I'm sure she takes after Amy a lot in that regard, a lot of Amy's deep-seated rage, I'm sure June has it as well. There are instances they kind of brought up, was it last episode, I want to say? Yeah, they brought up, the fact is that she bit a dog or something. Well, Jordan's sister-in-law might have been talking about that. Either way, about their kids doing stuff. So it's I think it's bubbling beneath the surface. So, especially with June, and it's going to probably be an ugly awakening the moment Amy finds that out about, June. But we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good